It definitely seems everyone focuses on the 1800X, which is understandable, but the 1700 is just as significant and users want to know what they're getting. So let's go over some gaming benchmarks. Stay tuned. Welcome back to GamerMeld. I do try to read as many comments as I can, and it seems some feel like I'm overly critical of AMD on gaming performance of Ryzen. Some take my criticisms as me saying I don't like Ryzen or am an Intel fanboy, but that's just not the case. I love competition, and I definitely think Ryzen is a fantastic processor, even in gaming. And I know people are saying 8 cores isn't for gaming. Trust me, I've explained and discussed that as well, and agree with you mostly, but for those who believe 16 threads could be the future of gaming and who just want more cores for more professional work as well as gaming, this is for you. So let's get into it. PC Gamer did a great article not too long ago where they compared gaming performance of Ryzen 1700 with Intel's i7-5930K. For reference, the 5930K comes in at right around $600. Ryzen 1700 is of course $329. Now for those curious of professional benchmarks, I'm going to go ahead and tell you. The 1700's 8 core 16 threads obliterates the 5930K's 6 cores 12 threads in most heavily threaded processes. Some things like Y-Cruncher, it loses, but typically by a very small margin. Only a couple very rare instances is the processor losing by a good amount, and that mostly has to do with the architecture. But for most professional work, it's not even comparable, especially when we're talking price to performance. So PC Gamer did these benchmarks, and I'm only going to show one graph and just quickly discuss the others, so if you want to see the rest, head on over to PC Gamer because they did great work. I'll leave a link in the description. Before I get to the graph, let's go over to the test rigs used. Both chips were overclocked, which is great. The 1700 was running at a nice 3.9 GHz, while Intel's was at an impressive 4.2 GHz. Ryzen was running with 16 GB of memory at 3000 megatransfers per second, and Intel's at 2666. But that isn't as relevant, as Ryzen is the main one that benefits from beefier RAM specs. Then, the main GPU is the 1080 Ti. On to the benchmarks. 4K is pretty much margin of error stuff here. So if you game at 4K, it's definitely the 1700, though as GPUs get faster, later on could be different, but I don't see that happening anytime soon, and anything near 100 FPS is great with very few people wanting more. Of course, there's an argument for the 1700 when it comes to the future of gaming anyway, but I'll discuss that later. At 1440p, the differences are really minute, minus a random game running horribly on Intel's platform thanks to a driver issue according to PC Gamer. The biggest differences is running at 1080p and on medium settings. The minimum FPS is a little worse for Ryzen, but I mostly want to focus on the averages. Now let's take a look at the graph. As you can see, minus a couple random games, Ryzen holds up incredibly well, and we're talking against a CPU that's twice the price. I'm sure some people will say the 7700K can do better for closer to the price, but it can do better than the $600 Intel CPU as well. It's just not a fair comparison. Now, that's not to say that they shouldn't be made. Gamers who do just that, gaming and want the best performance on current games right now, would do better with the 7700K, really. That's just a fact. You could say later, etc., but I'm talking now. If Ryzen 5 does incredibly well in games, that could completely change, but that's why I'm comparing Ryzen 7 to the Intel's higher core CPU. But yeah, we're talking 10% differences here for most games, yet for 50% less. That's great. Now, if you want to buy a PC for a specific game and Ryzen isn't great in it, by all means, don't get it. Sure, it will improve, but it's doubtful you'll see that much in a game it's currently doing really bad in, no matter what AMD says. It would require serious coding differences. Of course, it's still great FPS either way. Basically, I'm wanting to make sure everyone knows AMD really has done fantastic with their new CPUs. There are a couple issues that I've discussed that could hinder them in the future, but who knows how much of a difference that'll really be, and hopefully game developers will look at that and be able to transfer that knowledge into the code. So yeah, I really do like Ryzen. Hell, my next PC will almost certainly be Ryzen 7 based. The fact is that right now, more than 4 cores, 8 threads, and lower clocks is simply not the best platform for strictly gaming. So those who say it's not for gaming are pretty well right. If you do gaming and professional work, Ryzen 7 is incredible. And really, more cores in gaming very well may be the future of it. And whether Ryzen's architecture will be a big hindrance of that, I don't know. But really the question is when, and that I don't know. Either way, for those spending a ton of time deciding, trying to figure out what CPU they want to use, there's one answer that must be said. When it comes to gaming, your GPU has far more effect on your FPS than your CPU. That's not to say it's unimportant. Don't get a single core 2 GHz CPU and say, but you said it's not important. No. It's just not as important. And DirectX 12 is set to make that even more the case, as yes, it allows devs to more easily scale to more cores, but it's also made to send more work to the GPU. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that Ryzen 7 is fantastic. Hopefully Ryzen 5 can do for gaming what Ryzen 7 has done for professional work, and maybe the future will favor Ryzen 7 in purely gaming as well. Only time will tell, but there's one thing that's for certain. PC gaming is going to have a great year. That does it for today's video. I hope you liked it. If you did, go ahead and click that round icon in the middle to subscribe. You can also check out my last video to the left or a suggested video to the right. And as always, have a great day.